we began to make these harps, which was 37 years ago. I can't believe that myself. I know. Since I'm only 22, how could that have happened? I don't know. Anyway, so we didn't really have any idea what we were doing. We were basically, I wanted a harp. My husband, who was an instrument maker, he said he'd make me a harp, and that was kind of it. And we came to Israel, and we fell in love with the idea that there was an ancient harp, more ancient than the ones I knew when I lived in America, because you see them in restaurants and weddings, and they're very beautiful. All harps are beautiful, that's for sure. But I don't know, our heart or our soul, it was calling out for something more, connecting with King David, connecting with our history and our ancestors. So we came across this archaeology drawing that's found in a cave in Megiddo. You've been to Megiddo, yeah, right? Yeah, so most people know of Megiddo for things that are most likely going to happen in the future, but actually for all these thousands of years, people were living there. There's a lot of caves there. So what's a cave? In those days, it's a built-in apartment. Mm-hmm. You move in, you sweep out the scorpions, and you're home. That's it. So I think somebody was redecorating, that's my feeling, but they drew a picture on the wall of the cave of a harp. Yeah, a harp similar to this, not as, nice, of course, but the primitive version of it. And they call it, archaeologically, it's dated 3,000 years old by carbon dating, and they have a name for it. They call it the Megiddo harpist. Yeah, so it's very ancient. Nobody's allowed anymore to go in that cave, of course, and they protect it because this is now history. But we decided, why should we make a harp from some other place that's so much newer? Let's go back and make a harp that our ancestors literally heard with their ears. And so he decided to make this harp, or something similar to it. But he was just making it for me. That was the whole thing. It had nothing to do with anyone else in the world. And by a series of very unusual circumstances, which is the way I think God works, a woman came to our door. We were living in Tiberias at the time. And we were living, again, far off the beaten track, which I guess must be our motto or something. Anyway, we were away from everybody. But somehow or other, she came to the door, and she said, my name is her name, and I know this sounds unusual, but I don't like to buy fruit. I like to pick fruit. And she holds up an empty plastic bag, and she points to a lemon tree that was right outside our front door. And she said, do you mind if I pick a few lemons from your tree? So it was early in the morning. It's going to be a good day. Okay, interesting anyway. So he said, sure. She picked her lemons. In Tiberias, it's almost always hot. So by the time she's done, she's sweating and everything. So we said, would you like to come in? We invited her into our apartment, and she came in and she sat down in a chair, not this chair, but a different chair like this, and she's kind of recovering from her exertion of picking lemons. And she kind of looks around the room, and she sees in the corner of the room these pieces of wood. And she said, seemed to me like out of curiosity, she said, oh, what's that? What are you doing? And my husband said, oh, nothing. I'm just making a harp for my wife for her birthday, which was coming up. Oh. And she's like, a harp, a harp. There hasn't been a harp like this in 2,000 years. You must be the one bringing back the harp of David. It's like, who are you? We didn't even know this woman. And suddenly she starts saying all these things. And it's like, how would she know this anyway? So it turns out that she was a journalist for the Jerusalem Post. Wow. Actually, I have somewhere here, wait a minute. I have the original story. Here, it's the last copy of it. Anyway, it's called The Return of David's Harp. Wow. And that was in, I think, 1984 or something like that. And she claimed she'd lived here a long time. And she claimed that this was the first harp to be made in Israel, and she would be in a position to know because, number one, she was a journalist, and number two, she lived here since, I think, before the Second World War. So she really knew what was going on here, and she thought this was a really interesting story, The Return of David's Harp, and she wrote this article. So the article she said it was one of her most popular articles, and they put it in the international version as well, so it went out all over the world. And people started writing to us from this place and that place and France and every single place in the world, really. They started writing, and suddenly there are all these people who actually wanted harps. I guess nobody thought about it. Like, it was something they were, concerned about getting the tomatoes to grow. And here, this was a cultural thing that literally had been missing for all these years. So he started making these harps, and at the beginning, he really didn't know what he was doing. And the first 20 harps were more or less experiments, although we replaced every one that we had sold to people for those 20 harps. We replaced them later with a better harp because it had some issues. Actually, the very first harp that we ever made is the one up there. You see it up there on top there?
That was one for your birthday?
That was the one, right. And like a lot of people wanted to buy it, but we never sold it. And it's very historical now, So anyway, so we were making these harps. And then, not so far into it, we were contacted by Rav Ariel, who runs the Temple Institute. And he, at the time, was also beginning. And he had something like a closet with nothing in it, like just very few things. And he got something like his first donation. And he said, the first thing I want to put in here is a harp. Anyway, for all these years, we've been making these harps. And then last year, I myself began to think about this Psalm 137. I think it's 137, where it says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, and we wept when we remembered Zion, and we hung our harps upon the willow trees. Wow. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. You're doing a teaching of King David.
Really?
Yeah, you said something one time. It was really powerful.
Right. Okay, so anyway, this instrument, these harps that you see all over here, these were instruments of joy and blessing. That's what they were for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then suddenly, they were hung on the willow trees, and they became the symbol of exile. The symbol of exile is we hung our harps on the willow trees, and we wept when we remembered Zion. Right? So I thought about this, and it's like, wow, this is a symbol. This was the symbol, the main symbol, really, of exile, except for carrying away the menorah of that fresco or whatever that thing is in Italy. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Except for that, this was the main symbol of our exile. And what we did without realizing it is we took it off the willow trees to begin to be used and played again as in the days of old.
That's a beautiful analogy. You took it off.
We took it off the willow trees, literally. And we had no idea what we were doing. It was all really guidance, because we're like, Hansel and Gretel. Like, we're so innocent here. We don't even know what we're doing. He didn't know anything about the harp. He didn't know anything about this. And it's just that this was the way it goes. And if you follow God's leading, then you're going to come to a good place. Mm-hmm. And you just have to trust. I guess that's what faith really is to trust in something that you aren't 100% clear and sure about. Wow. But to go off in those connections through your prayers and understand that He is guiding all of us. And if we let Him drive the car, we might actually get to a better place than what we keep demanding. We want this, we want a washing machine, we want a Ferrari, whatever we want. But He wants to give us so much more.
Yes.
But if you keep demanding something, then maybe you'll get the washing machine, but maybe you won't. You'll be taking your clothes to the laundromat. Who knows? It's better just to say, I don't know anything. Wow. And if I'm here for this purpose, then I accept my job and I go forward with it with as much joy as possible.
I agree.
So that's what we did. And we made this little film about it, because I think it's so important to understand that now we're in a different stage. Because once the harp came off the willow trees, we entered, instead of being in exile, we're now in the time of redemption. Mm-hmm. It's the time of redemption. So in Hebrew, exile is called galut, and redemption is called geula.
Geula.
Right, they both begin with the G
that's pretty.
sound, so it's kind of interesting. Anyway, so this is really the message of joy, that after 2,000 years, we are in the period of redemption, which is not a one-day affair, but it's a long progress of different things, and all these things that you were mentioning with the frankincense farm, and like all these different things. These are something returning, and there's a word in Hebrew that's one of my favorite words. Unfortunately, my Hebrew still isn't so good, but there's certain words that really kind of speak to me, which is kind of play on words, and it's the word kadima. Yeah, did you ever hear that word kadima?
Forward.
Wait. So kadima means, okay, it means that, but actually the really deep meaning is we are going forward into the past.
Wow.
That's where we're going. We're going into the past, but we can only go one direction, which is forward. We can never go backwards. You can never make except for a movie, you can't make anything go backwards. Things are always going forward, but we're going forward into the past, which will become our future. So when the people speak about the future, they're actually speaking about the past. The world that was is the world to come.
Well, even King Solomon says nothing's new under the sun.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's true.
That's right.
Yeah, he does.
So that's kind of what we're very excited about. And there's another thing that we're doing. And we actually people are giving us donations about it. And it wasn't even really, again, it wasn't our idea, actually. But we're building a harp for King David.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that'll go to the Temple Institute, or that's a
No,
personalized?
that's going to be personal.
Wow,
When he shows up,
I love
he gets a harp.
Wow.
Or if it's one of his descendants who is the Messiah,
That's right.
he has.
It would be.
Yeah, and he would
So-
play the harp. So since the harp has been missing for 2,000 years, the Midrash, which says that King David, first of all, he never went anywhere without his harp. When he was in battle, wherever he was, he took his harp with him, maybe put it in a protected place, but he always had his harp. And at night, when he would go to sleep, he hung his harp in a tree above his bed, which is under the tree, not much of a bed, but anyway. And the wind in Israel changes direction 4 times. And in the middle of the night, what's called midnight, which in those days they didn't have clocks, so in the middle of the night, the wind comes from the north. And the wind would come and it would blow through the strings of the harp, and the harp would begin to play by itself. And it's really loud, because we have actually, one of my CDs, we recorded it.
Wow.
We recorded it playing in the wind up on in the old city. Yeah, and we did it at midnight too.
Wow. I love
And
that.
it's unbelievable, and it's not quiet. It's quite loud, but it's the wind. And so it plays something that your fingers could never do. And they say, according to the legend, that it would wake him up, and he would rise up at midnight, and he would begin to praise God and sing more psalms, and basically give his heart and his soul over to God at that time. Every string or every note or every sound is also a letter. And so that expands the music into something beyond the music, which is actually words. You can think, you can actually create words, sentences, or you could take the Bible and you could play the entire Bible from the first letter to the last letter, because underneath every meaning, and there's myriads of meanings to those words that God gave us, there's also music. It's an actual orchestral piece.
I know on some of your CDs you play like songs, which I think is amazing.
Right. So what I'm going to show you is how to use the letters. Okay, so all the letters are carved into the harp with a little good Jerusalem dust. Yeah. And this is a word. Okay, so I'm going to sound out the letters, the names, and you can, if you know the word, you can tell me. Aleph, Hey, Bet, Hey. What is it? Do you know?
No.
No.
Right, but that's not the Hebrew word. What's the word? Ahava. Ahava.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good word.
Like the face stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they named the Mud Sea Company, the Mud Company. But anyway, it means love. That's what it actually means. And it what is love? You know, a theory, a feeling, I don't know, an idea, but it's also a sound. So this is the sound. So listen to it. So right now what I did intentionally is I put out into the world a vibration of love, a little bit, and I hope someone somewhere, maybe even far away where they can't hear the sound of it, they feel a little bit more love today. I hope so. Yeah. So what I did with it, just to make it more interesting, is I used it as a rhythm and I made a little melody to go with it. Like that. So before you're even born, you have a song. Before you have a name, you have a song. And it's recognizable in the heavenly world. So it's really important that you know it. And when you're a little child, you do know it. But unfortunately, you know, especially these days, you know, a 2-year-old can use a cell phone better than me. So, you know, they're not focusing on their song so much. They're focusing on technology, on reading, on being in this world, but not the connections to the other world and to yourself, which is the first thing. So little children, and I guess these days you have to go pretty little, like your granddaughter.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. They know a song, and sometimes you catch them like humming or beating out a little drumming thing on the table when they're like a 1.5 old or something. Yeah, that's their song. And it should be encouraged rather than like, oh, stop doing that. Let's do something important. Yeah. So, but in order later, when you've forgotten it or you misplaced it or you don't know where it is, the harp can help you get it back. And it can, it can restore it to you. And when it does that, it has to be that the harp, obviously the harp doesn't have a brain in here somewhere, so it has to be able to go anywhere that you go. And so if you hear a melody in your mind, you have to be able to find the scale here without having to, you know, do cartwheels and readjust the whole harp, but just to go like that, and now you're in a different scale, and now you can go ahead because you're matching it with whatever melody you hear or you like that you hear on the harp. And so this gives the player, the person who's playing, a lot of freedom of creative expression. Because creative expression, this is the secret to joy, the secret to connecting with our ancestors, King David, because that's what he did. Like, he did not learn to play the harp in a conservatory. He was a shepherd.
So I was going to tell you, a shepherd, he played at night.
He played in the day, in the night, but he was playing by himself. He didn't have a teacher with him. The only teacher he had was his original teacher, which we now know as the Ruach HaKodesh. And this was the one who actually gave him the melodies in his mind. And as that happened, he also came from his songs, from his heart. And so it was like a communication, like instead of a cell phone tower, we had something else as a way of communicating, but this one was communicating with the heavenly world.
Even like King Saul, he played for King Saul, and he played a song for King Saul, and it wasn't just any song, it was a song that healed, you know, got him out of his depression.
Right.
So it had to be a song he wrote. They think he wrote it for King Saul.
He was inspired.
Yeah.
That's right. He was inspired. He was brought in. And it's very interesting, that passage, because it says two important things when David came to play. It says, and David came and played with his hand, which means he's doing what I'm doing. And it says, Saul began to feel better, and the evil spirit of depression left Saul.
That's right.
Like, what?
That's important. It shows how that music does heal, you know.
Not just music always can either help us or hurt us. Yeah, but the harp only helps. It's an instrument truly of music therapy, probably the very first one ever, and it's still doing that. And the frequency of it, the vibrational tone of each of the strings actually corresponds to our own matching, hopefully matching frequency when we're healthy. And if we're not, then the harp tunes us. Just like we tune an instrument, the harp tunes people and keeps them from either becoming sick or helps them greatly to get out of sickness. And I have so many people who've told me the most incredible stories. And the other thing that I think, of course I have no proof of it or anything, but I think that when I play my songs, that there's an angel doing a duet with me. And we play together. Yeah.
I like that.
So I'm going to play something for you, just so you can hear. Okay. So this is another song that's usually sung before Shabbat.
So pretty.
This is only, I'm only talking about this one harp here. We have others, but all of the instruments are connected with healing, prophecy, joy, prayer, spiritual warfare, and bringing you to your own self finally. I think it really strengthens us because people are so unaware of their purpose. Everyone here is for a purpose. We're not just thrown out like a bunch of carrot seeds, although I love carrots. But we're not like that. We're actually intentionally, God put us here for some reason, and that might be a very unique reason.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
In here, this is a little cold in here, but this is the machine room, and this is where we begin. Like if we, in order to make things so they don't take forever to do, sometimes we do the carvings and then finish the harp as it is developed. Yeah. Anyway, so we come in here and you can see there's a lot of machines, parts, wood, and over here is the actual wood. Oh, come and smell this. This is cypress wood. Even the sawdust smells good.
Oh, it smells amazing.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? This is cypress?
Yeah, because we just did it yesterday.
Boy, it smells so good. I love that smell.
Yeah.
Now, where do you get your wood?
So some of it comes from Israel.
Right.
Like, for example, over here, this is a good picture here. This is olive wood.
Right.
And that tree, that big wide tree, is minimum, according to our wood dealer, is minimum 500 years old. 500 years old.
Wow.
And it's probably older. He just didn't want to, you know, make sure he wasn't exaggerating. But anyway, these trees, can you imagine standing in one place for 500 years, never moving,
And then now
only waving your branches a little bit?
And now you get to become
And now you're going to sing.
Yes.
After 500 years, you're going to sing. and move maybe all around the world, depending on who owns you.
I love that.
So all the trees here, they stay here for a few years, and they kind of understand their new position in the life. Okay, wait a minute. This does not need to be here. Okay, so over here, you can see this is cypress, and you can see already they're beginning to make a cutting of carving, so it's going to be cut out. But that's the original, that's the actual wood. And then over here, you see this wood here. This is Israeli rosewood, which I believe is probably the one yours is made from.
Right, I think so.
And this is cherry wood and maple wood and walnut.
You get them shiny, you get them polished, and they're like diamonds. They're beautiful.
Right. So we spend a long time making each harp, and really, if we know the person, it's even better a little bit, because then we know who we're making it for, and then that person takes it to its own new level. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Shoshana.
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much. You've been such a blessing to all of us. And keep shining. Keep making. I love you.